I spent a large majority of the last 2 to 4 years purely chasing pleasure because I thought that by having all of this pleasure in my life, by feeling all of these good things, that would make my life amazing, that I would always be happy, that I would feel so great all day because, I'm experiencing pleasure, right? Pleasure feels good. Pleasure is something that everybody wants to experience in their life. And everyone has a different way that they go about experiencing their pleasure. Some people it's drugs, some people it's alcohol, some people it's partying, some people it's, this or that. For me specifically, it was just social media. It was just endlessly scrolling on TikTok, on Instagram, and it wasn't always necessarily like stupid content. Like a lot of it was like a lot of like helpful kind of advice type of content, but I was just completely over consuming it. Like I would watch YouTube videos like I wouldn't watch them visually, but I would listen to YouTube videos while I would drive. I would listen to them at the gym. I would listen to YouTube videos while I was doing everything throughout the day. And it made my life so full of dopamine that I wasn't able to do normal things anymore. I wasn't able to just enjoy a workout without listening to something. I wasn't able to just go on a walk without listening to something, right? And not that I'm perfect now. I'm still struggling with this, but I've improved a lot. I've deleted, both of the platforms where I would watch short form content, that being TikTok and Instagram, right? Because YouTube, there's shorts on YouTube and you can still get lost on YouTube. But at least more or less you're watching longer form videos. You're actually learning something. It's an improvement from Instagram and TikTok, right? Eventually I want to get to the point where I'm only watching videos that are over 30 minutes long because I found that those are the videos where I actually get something out of it rather than just doing it for a stimulus, right? I learned that from a Chris Williamson podcast. One of his friends on the podcast was talking about how he only watches videos that are over 30 minutes long. And I thought about that. I was like, yeah, like I was thinking back like, okay, I watched a Huberman podcast that was over 30 minutes long. I watched a, review on a car, but it was over 30 minutes long. So I feel like I really, learned something. And so that's a good little frame that you can adopt into your life too. If you're struggling with social media addiction, try and only listen to things that are over 30 minutes because those are the ones that aren't just triggering your dopamine system. They're actually giving you something valuable. But I say all this to say, I was in and still am getting out of that dopamine trap where you have a baseline and then you start to do something so often that increases your dopamine that your baseline is lower, right? Because think about your dopamine like a pool, right? So if you're always spiking your dopamine super high, you're using up a lot of the dopamine that's in the pool, and therefore when it goes back to normal, it's lower, right? So let's say like naturally, whatever that means, you're in the middle, right? If you're always doing things that spike your dopamine super high, you're using it up, and so therefore when you go to baseline, it's lower, it's like down here. Whereas if you start here and you do something hard, then it's gonna have a long lasting effect where your dopamine actually spikes and then your baseline is normal. So what was my issue with that? Well, I was always watching content which would spike my dopamine, but then whenever I wanted to go and do something else, I didn't have any dopamine left to go and do that thing. Because dopamine isn't just about pleasure, it's not just about enjoying things, it's about motivation and drive. So when your dopamine is completely gone, you don't have motivation to do simple things. Like people who suffer from addiction or from anything that is highly dopaminergic, you ask them, like, they can't do simple things. They can't brush their teeth. They can't take a shower. They can't go outside on a walk. They can't read a book, right? Because they don't have that store of dopamine to do things, right? And it's one thing to just say, oh, David Goggins, just do it anyways. But like, that's not how it works. You need to have the neurochemistry right in order to actually be able to make the changes in your life that you want to. For me personally, like I remember after I stopped watching short form content, I was able to enjoy life that much more, right? I could read books more successfully. I could do videos more successfully. I could cook without watching a video more successfully, right? And again, I'm not in a place where I'm perfect, but it's about progress over time, right? I've gotten to the point where I'm mostly watching like shows on Netflix or podcasts or things like that, where it's a lot more long form rather than just doing something that is that quick hit, right? That quick, spike and then drop. Pleasure is not the same thing as happiness. And it's a very interesting concept because people say, don't pursue happiness, don't just pursue meaning. But I think what they're actually trying to say is don't pursue pleasure, because happiness comes as a result of meaning, right? So there's a lot of people, and it's a good message. They say, don't chase happiness. Don't just always try to be happy. But what they actually mean by that is don't do things that just make you feel pleasure in the moment, but long-term make your life worse. And so if you're doing the opposite, if you're doing meaningful things, if you're doing things like, exercise, eating healthy, doing a job that helps others, things like this, well, that's obviously going to lead to happiness. So to say like, oh, don't chase after happiness, well, that kind of doesn't make any sense, because happiness comes as a result of having meaning in your life, right? There's no one who is living a super purposeful, meaningful life where they're helping others and they just feel miserable, right? That's not how it works. I'm not saying they always feel like they're in la la land all the time. I'm not saying everything is always easy, but a sense of purpose gives you a feeling of happiness. I think most people would agree on that, right? And a life without purpose, although it may be pleasurable in the moment, in the long term, when you look back on that period of time, is actually not like fun. It's really interesting to think about this. Let's say you have a year of your life, okay? And you live that year and you spend all your time partying, scrolling on your phone, sleeping in late, doing drugs, doing alcohol, right? All these kind of things that are just spiking pleasure, okay? Now let's say you live that same year, but instead you do harder things. You do more meaningful things that make you truly happy, right? So you go to the gym, you wake up early, you read, you stay off your phone, you go outside, all these kind of things, right? Well, the interesting thing is, if you look back on that period of time, to the first one where you're chasing pleasure, you're chasing these quick hits, you would look back on it and you'd be like, no, that wasn't fun. That was like stupid. There might be a couple memories that were fun, right? And this guy's doing something stupid. But you would kind of look back on that and be like, no, that wasn't really that fun. You can't even remember half the things that happened because you were so drunk, right? Whereas if you have a year, you learn a new skill, you get bigger in the gym, you increase your income, you'd be like, yeah, that was a fucking awesome year. Even if, during the time it might have been difficult in certain ways, in the long term, it's actually enjoyable, it's actually meaningful, it actually makes you happy, right? And this has been something that I've been trying to learn. Because to me, hard work does come naturally in certain areas, but I'm very rational, and so I think, well, if I'm always doing stuff that I don't want to be doing, then why am I doing it at all? Well, it's because when I look at it retrospectively, I'm going to say, wow, that was so important, that was so meaningful. If I look at it just now like, oh, I have to record this video, I don't want to do it, that means I shouldn't do it. That's a very logical, rational way of looking at it, but it's not necessarily going to lead me to the best life, right? Because I'm never going to be doing things that are going to be better in the long term. And so it's a nice lesson that I've learned. It's like a life lived where you do meaningful things every day is actually will make you more happy in the long term. So you can't just look everything as, oh, what do I want right now? Right? What do I need right now? It's kind of like the, fuck your feelings, follow the plan kind of thing, right? Like, this plan will work long term, but the only thing that I have to do in order to get to that plan is follow it regardless of how I feel in the moment, right? And I'm not like a big guy on like, oh, we should always be doing things that we hate or all this kind of stuff, right? But it's like, if you want, let's say your goal is to get bigger in the gym, right? If you kind of feel that little resistance, like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym, like I feel tired, which I actually had today, by the way. It was a leg day and not fun until I got there. And then I got there and I enjoyed it. But if you feel that little bit of resistance, you got to push through that. If you're doing something in the long term where every day you wake up and you hate your job, that is different. That's something that you should figure out and that you should change. But those little bits of resistance are just something you have to push through, right? So let me give you an example. If I was recording this video and I felt that little bit of resistance, like, oh, I don't want to record, like, this is going to be, it's going to suck. I don't know what I'm going to say. I'm not going to sound good. I need to push through that. I need to be able to push through that, right? That would be detrimental to me if I wasn't able to push that feeling. Whereas if I am looking at my career of doing YouTube as a whole and I'm like, oh, I hate doing YouTube. Like, this sucks. This is so boring. I hate talking to the camera. Like, this isn't what I want to do with my life. Then I should probably change, right? So it's about looking at the short term versus the long term. But anyways, back to my main point of this video. The common misconception, I don't even know if it's a misconception because I don't think people necessarily think about it, but people inherently assume that a life filled with pleasure is a happy life. Again, if I'm always getting that hit from drugs, if I'm always getting that hit from, social media, if I'm always drinking, then that's going to be a happy life because, oh, I'm turning up, I'm at the parties. But when you look back at your life, there's nothing there. That's the mistake I made throughout high school, right? Is I was always just like, oh, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to do anything outside of my comfort zone. I don't want to make any friends. And it was fine in the moment, right? Because I didn't really care. I was like, okay, whatever, I'll just be by myself. But now when I look back at my high school career, I'm like, damn, I didn't do anything. I wasted it, right? And so it's a very important lesson because now I know I don't want to do that with my whole life, right? I wish I didn't do it in high school even, but I can't go back and change the past. So now I need to make sure that I don't repeat that same mistake throughout my entire life. And how do I do that? I do things that cause friction in the moment, that take a little bit of oomph to get started, but will benefit me when I look back in 6 months. That is the key to a meaningful life. It's not doing things you hate. Again, I want to make this very clear. It's not doing something that you hate doing. That's one of Jordan Peterson's rules for life. Do not do things that you hate, but do things that cause a little bit of friction in the moment. All right, that's the key. I hope y'all got the message. I hope you guys got something out of this video. Thank you for watching. Peace.